I'm sure you've seen any one of these videos pop up in your feed about buy now, pay later or BNPL, the credit where you pay 25% every 2 weeks. Yet, I know you haven't seen any of these headlines for BNPL. Yet, none of those headlines for the BNPL industry. These were all from the credit industry written decades ago, when credit was seen as evil, predatory, and degenerate. See any similarities? Well, I certainly do, and I believe that there's many things that people just do not see about the BNPL industry and why it's a great opportunity for shareholders and even more for consumers. But first, let's jump into the most interesting superiority of BNPL against credit that many people seem to overlook. Let me ask you this: who is more likely to default on their payments? A credit card user or a BNPL user? The option used by those with a lower income, lower average checking account, and the lower average credit score, or the one with the higher income, higher average checking account, and higher average credit score? Well, if you said the credit card, then you're completely wrong. BNPL charge-offs are much lower than that of the charge-offs of credit cards, and the reason behind this is because credit cards are designed to be profitable when you fail financially, and BNPL is much more inclined to be profitable when you don't fail financially. Now, a strong counter would be citing the amount of late fees that people often pay on BNPL services, though a firm charging a small late fee for payments is not the same as having a 20% compounding line of credit. I personally know people who have had their lives destroyed by the compounding balance that they just don't understand. You can create the idea all you want that the possibility that a consumer may not understand the nature of late fees, and I argue if this is the case, then they really don't understand the idea of a compounding balance. BNPL is designed to have consumers to succeed while credit only succeeds when you fail. Also, add in the fact that often the largest market for those using BNPL are younger consumers, meaning naturally they're going to have a lower credit score. And I would argue that the average person between 20 and 30 doesn't truly understand the risks of a compounding balance, which is why it's so important they don't use credit cards. Credit card to me is like selling options. If you know what you're doing in the long term, then yeah, you'll probably yield some nice reward. And if you don't know what you're doing, then well, you might just destroy your entire financial future. In my opinion, the biggest barrier for BNPL right now is the bad press that they're experiencing. And why is there so much bad press? Because let's be honest, what's more satisfying than seeing your favorite YouTuber fight for the little guy, right? I mean, the big corps are trying to rip us out of our hard-earned money. And that's just how the news works. That's how it makes money, around fear and anger, and that's why BNPL is such a large target of all this negative press. On the topic of making money, did you know that at the core, BNPL never makes money off the consumer? There's other services that you can pay for, but the core BNPL offering doesn't make money off the consumer, it makes money from the merchant. Meaning if you use an option such as Klarna, you're never going to pay fees as a consumer unless you do something that's against the agreements of the loan, like pay late. BNPL makes money only from the merchant at the core of the business. How predatory is that? The question for shareholders in BNPL is, will BNPL be high growth enough for the next few years like it's repeatedly cited to be, and then will it be a stable used industry for the next few decades? Well, let us consider the groups who need and use credit on a daily basis. Who does the best using credit? Well, the people who never pay interest and still yield rewards. Those are going to be the people who pay off their balance in full each cycle. And who's going to do the worst? Those who cannot pay off their card each time and allow the interest to compound. Because certain people fail with traditional credit offerings, there must be a gap in the market where there's not a service for those people. There can't just be a cutoff and we say, well, I guess these guys don't get credit opportunities. That's just not how our economy works. If there's an inefficiency in which a group who should have access to an offering and they don't, then that gap should be filled. This allows us to understand why BNPL has been taking market share from credit for the last few years, because consumers are realizing that this is a healthier option for them than traditional credit. I want to compare the valuation of the businesses that operate in BNPL and the businesses that operate in credit. So let's just take one example, American Express trading at a much higher PE than that of Sezzle, or a much higher price to sales than that of Klarna. Yet the growth of both Klarna and Sezzle dwarf that of American Express. It appears that the reason for this is because the market just does not believe in this growth, that it's stable, and the market doesn't believe that BNPL is an industry viable for the long term. Also, I want to make another point, that BNPL in and of itself is a commodity-like transaction business, because you make between 2 and 5% depending on the firm on the merchant transaction fee, but then nothing else. It's much better business to be yielding interest like Amex. Though neither Sezzle or Klarna yield revenues only from BNPL, they also yield incomes from other services, and in Sezzle's case, subscriptions that expand beyond just the core BNPL service, which I explain in another video, and Klarna's case, banking services, which I also explain in another video. It's my opinion that part of the reason for this intense price discrepancy is the fear in the market surrounding the lending space in general and the fear of the new industry and whether it's actually sustainable. It's my opinion for Sezzle and Klarna, if they're forecasted to grow at their expected future rates in only BNPL businesses, then their intrinsic value should be recognized, which allows me to feel a margin of safety when buying these companies. This also does not account for the other services that they're beginning to introduce. The growth of these companies is strong, and it's often hard to balance strong growth and strong profitability in financial companies. We only develop an edge in the market from our own thoughts that we generate in our head, and that's the only thing that separates us from a different player. So make sure to use your own head and do your own research and come up with your own conclusions. If you think Klarna and Sezzle and the BNPL industry in general are going to zero, then you have your own idea that might generate an edge against me, for example. And I'd love to hear your ideas because this is how we sharpen each other as investors. I'd love to hear any other logical arguments against BNPL. These kinds of conversations just make us better. So I would love to hear what you have to say and what you think is different from what I'm interpreting about the BNPL industry. And if you want to see any more of what I have into the future, make sure to check right here.